Hope you are all doing well and ready to learn something. I'm going to show you how to draw some eyes today. And if you've followed along with me before, you know I always start with some guidelines. So what I'm doing here is just making, let's see, I'll make it a little bit bigger, is, you know, when you're drawing eyes, oftentimes it's hard to make one eye. Once you get done with one eye and it looks really good, you mess up the other eye. So this is just a little easy way to keep them symmetrical. What I'm doing here is I'm going to create 3 equal rectangles. Let's see. So we'll make them about 3 inches, each one about 3 inches wide. And the reason we're doing this, each one of these rectangles on the edges here is going to be an eye. Here's an eye, and this is going to be an eye. And the space in between your eyes is the same width. So if you look close, if you maybe grabbed your eye, copied it, and pasted it in the middle here, it's going to be the same width. But this is just a quick little way that I like to make sure that my eyes are symmetrical. Let me make sure I can see everything on the screen here. Okay, and I'm going to move this over a little bit so we start with one eye and we'll move over. Okay, so what I like to do to start is picture this as an eyeball. So we'll make this a circle. Really quick and just really lightly so you kind of get a visual of it. There's your eyeball. Your iris is going to be in here somewhere. But we're going to draw a woman's eye. So how I like to do it, and this is a little bit stylized, but I'm going to go right from this corner and maybe up like a 45-degree angle and then start to curve it over. So it's meeting maybe right around the center of the eyeball. And then over here, we're going to cut off, a little bit more than that. We're going to cut off about like that. So this little point is almost the center. And then we'll come down like that. And then this little spot, that's your tear duct. It's going to kind of come up like this and then down and around. So hopefully this is a way that you can kind of copy your angles using this rectangle as a reference. So you don't have to worry about drawing everything. Anyways, we'll get to that one in a second. But that's a basic shape of our eye. Now you want to add your eyelid. And this is just kind of from muscle memory because I do this all the time. So if I wanted to draw very realistically, I would need a reference photo. But this is just from memory. So right here at the edge of that corner, we're going to draw this line that comes out. And that's going to be the edge of that eyelid. I'll erase some of these guidelines. I'm going to erase this top part too. Okay, so we've got the basic shape of our eye now. Now, the biggest trick I could give you, let me make sure we're okay and we're lined up here. All right. The biggest trick I could give you that I notice when people are drawing eyes is, or the biggest mistake I see, people draw the pupil, or sorry, the iris, way too small. And it ends up looking like they're hypnotized or something. So my tip to you is to go beyond this eyelid. So that iris, the eyelid is going to be covering part of the iris. And then notice that I don't quite go all the way down here. I'm leaving a little bit of space right there. And this all depends on the angle and the way the eye's looking at you, but that's the basic shape of our iris. Now I'm going to add the pupil. Let's try to find center, something like that. I always do those little lines to help me find center. There's our pupil. Now, in my opinion, the most important part to drawing eyes is getting those reflections right, and to make it look kind of like they're wet. Or so what I like to do, I'm just going to draw kind of this little jelly bean over here. That's going to be our white highlight. And then opposite that, we'll say our light source is coming from this direction. So there's our highlight. Opposite that is going to be another one. A little bit bigger, and it's not going to be as bright. Okay, so you got all these little random shapes. Now here's the fun part. Actually, I don't want to get ahead of myself. This pencil I'm using right here, this is an HB pencil. It's basically like your number 2 pencil. I'm going to use this, using the side of my pencil to shade in the iris. And then I'm going to use one of these guys. This is a little blending stump. It's just paper wound up really tight. And I like to use this. You could use your finger or a tissue or a Q-tip or something, but I like to use this. And all it's doing here is blending the graphite that we put down and kind of getting rid of those little stroke lines and just making it smoother and softer. And it's also pushing all of the graphite into the tooth of the paper, so you don't see the kind of the little white spots that you would see. It's called burnishing. I'm going to grab this and just quickly go over it like that as well. So I've got that little spot. So now I've got a couple little gradients of my shadows. Now I'm going to go from this pencil, my HB pencil, which is basically your number 2. And I'm going to go all the way over here to my darkest pencil. It's an 8B. The higher the B, the softer that core is, that graphite core is, and the darker it's going to draw. And I always talk about this. This is one of the first things I talked about in my course, is you don't necessarily need a giant set of pencils like this, but you do need a few different ones, because no matter how hard you try with your number 2 pencil, you will never be able to draw as dark as you can with an 8B pencil. Okay, so here we go. What we're going to do now is just draw a really dark shadow. This is the shadow from the eyelid up above it. And you can see it's drawing much darker than that HB pencil, or your number 2. And it really does make a big difference when you have all these different pencils. And then, let me make sure this isn't too... Yeah, I kind of have a little bit of a glare. Let me adjust these lighting. There we go. So now you can really see the difference. Now I'm going to lightly, or not lightly, I'm going to go around. It's going to be darker on the outside. This person's going to have maybe blue or green eyes. And it's going to get lighter and lighter down there towards the bottom. But it's going to start really dark on the top and work our way down. And just get lighter and lighter. Like that. Now we could grab that same pencil. We're going to draw that pupil really dark. Don't forget to leave that little spot for the highlight. I love doing the eyes and showing people how to do this, because I think it's really simple when you do it this way. And it's really fun that even if you've never drawn before, you could produce pretty good results. So now with that same pencil, that dark pencil, I'm just going to darken this up just a little bit on the top here. It's going to get lighter and lighter down towards the bottom. And we're going to use our blending stump to blend this all together. So I'm going to grab that blending stump again. And you can see how it's kind of grainy. You can see it's kind of scratchy. With this blending stump, when you do these tiny little circles, it just blends it all together, so you don't see so it's not so sketchy or grainy. And that's it. It's just pushing the graphite into the paper and into the tooth or the texture of the paper. Darken this up a little bit more. Okay. Now I'm going to go back to my HB pencil. You don't necessarily have to have all these pencils to get started. All you need is some paper and a pencil to practice drawing. But it really does make a difference when you're trying to go from you know, kind of medium shading to a really dark shadow. You want to be able to get all of those variations of tone and value, and you can't really get them with just your number 2 pencils. So that's why I always use these other ones. Now, even these 8B pencils, these real dark areas here, you can't really draw black. It's only probably, I'm going to guess, maybe 80% black. But a way around that is if you had like a black colored pencil, you could use with your graphite. That'll draw black, or you'd have to switch over to charcoal. But I don't like using charcoal because I don't like getting my hands dirty. And another tip I like to give people when you're drawing realism, doesn't matter what you're drawing, there's rarely going to be any white on your paper. So even the whites of the eyes, we're going to shade just a little bit. And you can see this already has graphite on it, right? Left over from when I was shading over here. So I'm just lightly using that like I loaded it like a paintbrush, like it's got paint on it, except it's graphite. I'm just using that extra leftover graphite to add a little bit of shading. Okay, so we've got everything has at least a little bit of gray. I'm going to do a little bit more here underneath the eye for the shadow underneath that eyelid. Like that, okay. Now I'm gonna go back to my 8B pencil, and this is the fun part. This is the cool part and a little trick that that I like to do. So a lot of people, the biggest mistake they make when they're trying to draw eyelashes is they put them all in one direction, but they shouldn't be. The eye's facing directly towards you, and these eyelashes are jumping out towards you. So they're not necessarily going to all curve in the same direction. So what I like to do to make this easy is I draw kind of a V shape right here on the tip to start it out. Now everything on this side of that V is going to curve in this direction. So you kind of make these little W shapes. And you don't have to make them perfectly spaced, but there's the start of our eyelashes. Now everything on this side of the V is going to curve in the opposite direction, or the direction of this side. We're going to do the same thing, these little W's. Now over here on this side of the eye, those eyelashes are going to be shorter and fewer. There's not many eyelashes on this side of the eye. And then another thing, if you looked really close at your eyes, or maybe a photo, you'll notice that a lot of the hair, your eyelashes will come maybe 2 or 3 hairs that all group together, that grow from separate roots, but group together at the tip, like this. See how it's kind of pointing? These 2 different little hairs are pointing together at the tip, sometimes 2 or 3 or even 4. And then you could just put a couple in between. But try to see how that makes this kind of curvy V shape. And they don't all have to touch. And you don't necessarily have to do a ton of these. But you could do that to to whatever you think looks best. And then right here on the bottom, I like to color it in really dark. And even in these little V shapes, I'll color those in at the bottom. And I like to make them really long and really thick and exaggerated out here on the edge. And let me define that eyelid a little bit more over here. Okay, now another trick, instead of drawing your eyelashes coming directly out of the eyeball, let me erase this guideline. Instead of making your eyelashes coming directly out of the eyeball. Leave a little bit of a space. Just a small line right here. This is your I guess your water line. And we're going to do the opposite. So we had our little V up here. We're going to do kind of these long, skinny little V's. And remember, it's like two hairs growing separately but coming together at the tip. And not every single one of them has to be like that. You could draw a couple that are just, that don't connect, but maybe 30% or 50% of them connect. And then over here on the outside, notice the curve and the way those lines are curving out towards the outside of the eye. And then on this side, they're just going to get smaller and fewer, like that. Now with our magic blending stump, if we go through, just kind of blend it like this. Use the graphite that's already on your blending stump, and the graphite that is going to pull from those hairs that we just, or those eyelashes we just drew, is going to darken that up. Then I'll grab some from right here. Just go over the bottom to thicken up that line, and it's going to make this little white line right here stand out a little bit more and create depth to the eye to make it look kind of round. We'll do the same thing over here. Here's our tear duct. And then with that 8B pencil, I'm just going to darken up this eyelid as well. And then I like to make it really dark over here on the outside. Like she's got some thick eye makeup on. And just get lighter and lighter as it gets over here. And then right around here, you're going to have a little crease too. So I'm just using the graphite that's already on my blending stump. And I'm just going to shade. I want, like I talked about earlier, you want at least a little bit of gray all over your paper. And the reason for that is if you want to draw white on white paper, it's impossible. The only way you could do that, or see the white on the white paper, is... Oh, thank you for the gifts. That thing always scares me. It plays that cheering sound, and it scares me. Anyways, I appreciate that. To see the white highlights on your paper, it has to have a darker shadow or a darker tone next to it, so you could see with the contrast the highlight. Now this last little trick, actually, let me show you another. Before we move on to the final trick, let's add some detail to this eye. So I'm using that 8B pencil again. I'm going to start with kind of just all these lines I'm going to do are going to point towards the center of that pupil as if it's maybe a dartboard or something, or a bullseye. It's going to be a little bit darker on the outside of the eye. And you don't want it too dark. You want this kind of subtle. And we'll go through with our blending stump and kind of tone these down a little bit if it's too much. But almost like these little stripes. And notice they're not going all the way through. They're just kind of on the edges. Some will be a little bit longer, but some are shorter. Just like that. I know it's really soft, should be really soft and subtle. It looks soft and subtle in my drawing, but I'm not sure how it looks in the video. But then I'll just smudge it around a little bit. And then I could go back and erase a couple little spots like this. And this is why it's key to have some of those, to have those gray values down. So when you do erase those highlights, it really makes them pop and stand out. And then you could go and add a couple little freckles. And we're going to add some lines coming right from that pupil too. And then you could add these little freckles here and there. And then maybe you need to tone it down if we get too carried away. Now here's a cool part. This is really fun. This really makes a difference. So you've got your little bright highlight there. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna mirror these eyelashes. So watch what we do here. It's really dark. We're gonna mirror this one now. Maybe one more there. So it makes it look like that's the reflection of the eyelashes. And my last little tip, this is just a bigger blending stump, is if your drawing is big enough, you could add or erase these little short, almost little ovals on the eyelid that'll make it, that'll give it the texture, the skin texture. And it's just one more little trick to make your drawing look a little bit more realistic. Now, if you want it to be photorealistic, you're gonna have to look at a photo and have a photo reference or have somebody sitting there posing for you. But out of our imagination, I don't think this is, I think it's pretty realistic. You know, as realistic as we can get without having a reference photo. I like to have these little short little lines. And again, this only works if your drawing is big enough. So if your eye is really small, you're not going to see all these tiny little details. And you also don't want it to look like a lizard or a snake or something. So you want it kind of subtle. Let's see how it looks. Yeah, not too bad. And then you could go and erase a couple little highlights here and there to make it look, make the eye look wet. And then you just go and touch things up. But that's a little trick that I like to do to draw eyes. Now the biggest trick, or the biggest challenge sometimes, is making the other one match. So let's go over here. Let's do the same thing and see if we can make it match. Or basically start from scratch. Now I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to start here at the bottom and work my way up, and right around the center of this rectangle, that's where that line meets. And again, this isn't all eyes, this is just the eyes that I'm drawing at the angle that I'm drawing. Maybe she's looking down a little bit and looking out the top of her eyes. This one's going to come down to about here. And then remember, it comes up down over there for that tear duct. We'll draw the little crease right here for the eyelid. Wrap that around like that. Then we'll draw our iris. Remember, it's going behind the eyelid, almost to the bottom. Like that. Then we can go and draw our pupil. And then we're going to make our same little jelly bean highlights with that light source coming this way. And the reason I mentioned that light source is you want it to go through the eye. It's brightest here, and then on the bottom here, you have another little highlight. Not quite as bright though. Then using the side of our pencil, I'm going to shade it all in and kind of get our medium tones or medium values, or what I call midtones. In my course, I'm always talking about this. Our midtones are dark values. What that is, if you imagine you're shading with just 3 values, the white of your paper is going to be your highlights, this will be your midtones, and then something like the pupil over here is going to be your darkest values. So if you just try to simplify it with that, you've either got a highlight, a midtone, or a dark shadow. It should make your shading much easier. And then once you get those three values sketched out or shaded in, you can just blend them into, 100 different variations or 100 different values and tones in between those three values. All right, so I'm going to go back to my blending stump now. And see how it's all grainy? This pencil or this blending stump is just going to push all of that or blend all of that graphite and push it into the tooth of the paper. So that grain, so even those little valleys in the tooth of the paper where the pencil didn't originally get that deep into the groove of the paper, this little blending stump is going to push it in there, if that makes sense. We're going to blend this a little bit. And then now go back to our really dark pencil, our 8B. This time I'm going to start it a little bit different. No, it's the same, I think. We're going to draw the shadow under the eyelid. Really dark. All the way across to the edge of the iris. And then start with the outline of the iris. It starts really dark and gets lighter and lighter towards the bottom. Do the same thing on this side. Really dark and thick, and lighter down towards the bottom. I've even taught my little nieces, they're I think 5 and 7, how to do this. And it's amazing how well, that's why I always like teaching the eyes, because it's something that I think can be taught pretty easily if you follow along and produce great results. But anyways, 5 and 7. And in my course, people always ask, is my course kid-friendly? It is. There's no adult content or adult language or anything like that. My youngest student, I think, is 6 years old, and they're killing it. I think I had a few 6-year-olds, but plenty of kids in there. And so that kind of goes to show that even if you've never drawn before, it's you can make great improvements. It's not something, I wasn't born being able to do this. It's stuff I learned over years. All right, so I'm darkening it up again at the top. Getting lighter and lighter down towards the bottom. I'm just going to let my blending stump do the work for me. I'm going to blend all of those all the grain out of it. I think that pupil's a little off too, so I'm going to thicken it up a little bit. Okay. So now if you remember, the next part we're going to do, make sure you have a sharp pencil. Appreciate all the love, guys, and the shares. Appreciate it. You guys are super kind. Now with my sharp pencil, this is where I'm going to add that little V on top of the eye. So I know which direction to draw my eyelashes. Actually, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's shade all of this in, that top eyelid, using the side of my pencil because it's going to make it softer. When I say softer, what I'm talking about is if I use the tip of my pencil, you're going to have hard, sharp lines like this. When you use the side, it's going to be softer. And then I'm going to use a clean blending stump this time to blend that all. And these little blending stumps they come in tons of different sizes. This is my collection. Tons of different sizes. So if you need to get in really tight into a tiny little area, you've got these little bitty ones. Actually, that's pretty kind of a big size. But anyways, you can see there's these little tiny ones. There's tons of different sizes. But anyways, they're super inexpensive. You can buy probably a pack of 10 different sizes for, I don't know, $8 or something on Amazon. Or any art supply store. All art supply stores have them. So, all right, so I'm going to blend that Right now it still looks like you can see all my little curvy little blending lines in there, but we're just layering it in right now. So even though it looks, you can still see those, they'll go away before we finish. Okay, now let's jump back up to those eyelashes. So from this point, remember the eyelash on this side, everything's gonna curve in the same direction. And we're gonna do W's. And you could dip them down lower than that eyelid, where they're kind of jumping in front. But remember, on this side of the eye, they're gonna be fewer and shorter. But on this side of the eye, these little W's, they're gonna be thicker and longer. And over here, I like to make them really long. And then you can just go and start adding them in between. And remember, a lot of them are gonna come together to a point like this. Every time I do this eye, because I'm recording, the dexterity in my hand doesn't like to do these eyelashes the same. I would need to like rotate my paper to be able to hold my hand right and make them as smooth and as nice as I do on the other eye. That's right, I can make up for it though. Now I'm gonna darken in the bottom, almost like eyeliner. And see how it kind of has these little bumps here? That's fine. That's just the eyelashes dropping down below the eyelid. And a lot of times in these little triangles that it ends up creating, I like to fill those in. Something like that. And then from there, I'm going to erase my guidelines first. Thanks for all the love, guys, and hearts and shares and everything. I appreciate it. I'm going to darken the top of this eyelid a little bit. And then remember, we don't want the hair growing out of the eyelid. We want it growing out of, or sorry, we do want the hair to grow out of the eyelid, not the eyeball. So we draw that little water line there. And then we go down here. Right at the bottom, I always start with my little V. And then start adding them thicker and thicker, longer and longer out here on the outside until it meets up with this other one. And then fewer and fewer over here. Now with that blending stump, I'm using the graphite that's already on it and the graphite in the pencil that I just put down. And I'm just going to blend that and smudge it to add a little bit of shading, like she's got eye makeup on. And while I'm there, I can draw the shadow even on the white of the eye. See if I can reach my hand around this way. And then a little bit of gray everywhere in the eye. Like that. So the only white part right now should be that little water line. I can go darker over here where that eyeball, because it's a ball or a sphere, and it kind of wraps around. So you want it dark over here where it curves around. The same thing over here. Into that tear duct. And then if you remember, next is going to be, actually, let's add a little bit of shading here too. I call this a whip shading. I'm grabbing some graphite. I do this in tattooing as well. And you grab it and you just pull it really quick. Hard pressure here, lighter and lighter as it comes out here. And that creates a cool, smooth variation, and it blends it well. And they use, like I said, they use this in tattooing. I tattooed years ago in another lifetime. Great artist, maybe not a great tattoo artist. I did some that were okay, but the mechanics of tattooing is much different than drawing with a pencil or painting with a paintbrush. Okay, now you see I've got this white or some gray values here, so now I can go and erase those little highlights to make it look more realistic. Before we get there though, let's add some of those detail into the eyes. Remember, all these little squiggle lines are going to point towards the center, towards the pupil. And we're going to have a couple that come out from the pupil as well. Kind of like this. And they're not all going to be perfectly spaced. Some will be close together, some will be further apart. And do the same thing down here. And this is a really dark pencil, so it's going to go a long way, especially when we take that blending stump to it. So we'll do like that. That'll be our first little layer. Grab our blending stump. I just want to tone it down just a little bit. And I know I'm covering that highlight, and that's intentional because I want it to have this smooth transition, because then I can go back with my eraser and erase some, put some highlights back in it. It'll make it pop. It'll make it stand out more. And then you could go and put some of those little freckles. Maybe there's some green eyes, but they've got these little freckles in there. And again, without a reference photo, it's not gonna be photorealistic. It'll look realistic. This kind of, I call this impressionism, realism and impressionism kind of combined, because I'm doing my kind of impression of what I see. And I don't know, I guess people would call it realism, but. All right, so now the next thing we're gonna do is mirror these eyelashes. Just like that. Not much to it. Just those lines jumping right out in front of that highlight. I'm going to darken up the bottom just a little bit. And then, let's see. And then we could go, we'll darken up this part of the eye into that tear duct, a little bit over here. And then for the final part, we'll use our eraser to go and erase the texture in the skin. And again, this is only if you've drawn your eye big enough where you might see these. And you don't want it, you want it to be somewhat subtle, so they don't end up looking like a lizard or something. Unless that's what you're going for. And then over here, it's going to be even more subtle. You'll barely be able to see it on that light gray. But this is kind of just a little preview of what we do in my course. So I have 3 courses now. I started doing these courses March of last year. And I have my fundamentals course. It goes over a little bit of everything. Lighting, shading, obviously all your tools. We go into different pencils and these erasers and different types of paper and all that stuff for the fundamentals course, with perspective and lighting and shading, and do a little bit of everything. And then in my then we have my anatomy and portraits course. It does stuff more like this, more detailed drawings of people, where you could actually end up at the end drawing portraits. And even if you've never drawn a portrait before, most people by the end of the course are able to draw a portrait where you can actually tell who the subject is. And it's really fun to see everybody's results and see their feedback. I have this little private community where everybody shares their work and they get feedback and stuff, and everybody's super nice, and I get people from all over the world in that group, and it's fun. I'm going to do just this little line, maybe that little wrinkle. But again, without a reference photo, you're not going to necessarily see all of those or know where to put all those little details. Thicken this up a little bit. I always like to exaggerate it here out on the outside. For a guy, these eyelashes will obviously be much shorter. They aren't really shorter in real life. I mean, men's eyelashes are just as long, unless a woman or whoever has eye makeup on that accentuates them. But generally, it's just going to be, they're just going to be shorter, and they end up just looking like little, kind of like down here for the bottom lid or bottom eyelashes. But that is it. That's what I've got for eyes. Hopefully that makes sense to you guys, and you were able to keep up and follow along. I realize you may not have had your pencils, but I will save this and I'll download the live, and I'll post it so you can follow along in real time when you do have your pencils handy. But if you want to check out my course, there's a link in the bio. Oh, the last course I was talking about is my my newest course, and that's my wildlife course. So it's got all sorts of different animals, starting with kind of basic stuff. We always start with very simple shapes, kind of like we did with the eyes, and build our way up and block in our shading. So by the end, all of a sudden, you start with these simple shapes, and it turns into your masterpiece. And it's really fun, and I think it's perfect. Even if like I said, even if you've never drawn before, we start with the very basics, and we kind of work our way up. So you have the confidence and the ability to do more detailed drawings like this. So, and not everybody's is going to look just like this, but I promise it does make a big difference when you follow along and start with the simple shapes and all these simple principles that are easy to use, even if you're not following along to the videos. So if you want to check out my courses, just go to my website, iamshaneburke.com/courses, and you should, I think if you sign up for the waiting list, you'll be notified the next time registration's open, because it's not always open. It's only open a few times a year because I can't quite keep up. But thanks for watching. Hopefully it helped, and don't forget to follow. We'll see you next time.